time for another Elsie's Little Pickles, the pickle pod for the people, reminding you to do your pickle pod protest by leaving a pickle on a porch. You can add, if you want, you can add olives. You can spear some olives on there so it looks like a true dick. But that is what we are looking for, is we're looking for people to take their protest to the porches of MAGA supporters, throw a pickle on the porch, take a picture of it, send it to us at
Sounds
Elsie's.
like you're about to say throw a tit on the porch.
Well,
throw a tit on the porch.
You can throw a tit on the porch too.
Just one.
Pull it out of your sock and throw it up there on the porch.
Those little stress balls that have a nipple on it.
All right. So we've got another packed episode. This is going to hopefully be the third and final of Time to Get a New Party Started. This is something that we will continuously revisit. We will refine it. We will continue to talk about it because at this point, it does seem as if both political parties are fucking broken. And we desperately are in search and in of need of a new political party. Something that's for the people, of the people, and by the people, which is the way this fucking country was supposed to be run and hasn't been run for quite some time. However,
I would argue basically since the beginning.
Yeah.
We could name the party rather instead of my past ideas. Just plain name it. We're tired of your shit.
Yeah, the tired of your shit party. All right, but before we get started, normally we would do news, but Kiefer, you had something else that was on your mind, and you wanted to forego the news on this particular episode in order to discuss this.
The Technate.
All right.
The North American Technate.
So now this is something that's new to me. All right. The North American.
I'll explain it like this.
Now, but just for the
without coughing.
Just for the listeners. First off, we do have a full pickle barrel. We got Kiefer, we got me, and we've got Colton. Secondly, you and Colton are both pretty well versed in what this Technate thing is. So,
well, the concept of the Technate originates from the technocracy movement, which gained traction back in the United States and Canada during the 1930s. Guess what else was popular in the 1930s?
Yeah, it is basically just the watered down, barely American version of fascism or Nazism.
Okay.
That's kind of the idea. So essentially the Technate, that's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
The Technate boils down to, from my understanding, let's make America as blatant of an empire as we can beyond what we've already. Keith, you got a fun look on your face. What do you have?
Yesterday and today, right at this time, I keep getting helicopters.
Oh, okay.
They're after him.
They know where you are.
For this area. It is weird for this area, but
they're tracking you.
A technate refers to a region governed under technocratic principles, where decisions are based on technical expertise rather than political or monetary systems.
Mm-hmm.
The movement advocated for energy accounting as an alternative to traditional currency, using energy as a measure of value. Citizens would receive energy certificates to ensure equitable resource distribution.
Oh, so we're getting away from money.
Well,
I mean, that's
thanks, Nixon.
That's what it sounds like.
How often do people actually use bills nowadays rather than just cards?
You know what? I actually do it purposely. I do. I do it purposely because I like to see cashiers trying to figure out how to count change back. So for me, it's just it really is. It's like, for me,
Did you say 4 cents? Here's a nickel.
Yeah. What I'll do is, let's say, for example, the total is 1604. I'll give them a nickel, a 20, and a single to see if they can figure out what the fuck. And it's
go.
And to be honest, like, literally, there are times, like, it's one thing if they type it into the register and the register tells them, but I try to wait. And like, I've even gone so far as to go pull my card out and go, you know what? No, actually, let me do that cash. because that fucks them up in ways that just you
Let me
can't.
give you $1 and me to use the card for the rest.
I've done that.
You'll see people walk in to like their sheriff's office or whatever, or the courthouse, and they'll go to pay a parking ticket all in pennies.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's me.
They're
That's
like,
me.
we can't take that, sir. And they're like, well, it's legal U.S. tender, so yes, you can.
Yeah, you can. You have no choice, and I will wait here patiently while
I'll
you
wait
count.
here all day until you count that.
See, that's the kind of prick I am. I hate to admit it. I know it
While you're
sounds petty.
I'm going to order a pizza and use my credit card.
Yeah. But and I know it's petty. I know it's stupid. And I know that even when, like doing the thing with the cashiers or through the drive-through or whatever, I know
it's
that
not much different from paying your IRS bill and mailing in your receipts from hell, Michigan.
Right.
So you can be like,
you go to hell. All right. So getting back to this to me sounds a lot like Curtis Yarvin's.
Yeah, it's very similar. To me, it's basically like the overarching vision of what Curtis Yarvin wants to do. So Curtis Yarvin's philosophy is essentially the idea of like, okay, we're going to make little fiefdoms, little serfdoms.
Yeah, it gets to the heart of every business is in and of itself its own
autocracy,
or for not necessarily its own country, but its own state at least.
Yeah, so essentially it's like, okay, what if we did monarchy, but instead of God-ordained kings, we had money-ordained kings?
Mm-hmm.
And this technate is essentially extending that concept across the continent and a little farther, which to me sounds a lot like an empire.
Well, it is. That's why it sounds that way.
We already have had the American Empire for a while with like Guam and Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands and all of this. We've already had kind of an empire, but now we're really just leaning into like, no, we're trying to revive the Roman shit.
Well, here's what bothers me.
And I seem to remember that didn't work out too well.
Yeah. So, and that gets to the point of what bothers me about this whole idea. There's this, I hate to say this, but not to sound old-fashioned, 1776 old-fashioned, but the idea of a republic.
You grabbing your musket?
Yeah. The idea of a republic.
3 rapscallions break into my house at midnight. I put on my powdered wig and my pantaloons and grabbed my preloaded scattershot blunderbuss. I put a 1/4-inch hole through the first one, and he's dead instantly.
You created that whole scenario and used the right words for everything, including blunderbuss, with no forethought whatsoever.
I'm sorry, I didn't buy it for a second because I didn't hear any these or thys. I'm out.
I unsheathed mine sword. Ashley's at the top of the stairs with the stair-mounted cannon.
I love it. I fucking love it. So, I like I said, at the risk of sounding 1776 old-fashioned,
Speaking of small cannons, there's a guy somewhere in the area that every morning at 6 a.m. he fires a cannon.
Get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Oh,
he's got a cannon on his front porch.
That's got to be a fucking... It's got to be annoying. It has got to
Texas,
be annoying.
eat your heart out.
So, with the risk of sounding 1776 old-fashioned, I do believe that what we have seen is that a republic, a democratic republic, has worked pretty fucking well, right? So my question is...
That's because they no longer want it.
That's my thing, is I don't think that people want it anymore. Franklin famously said, "We gave you a democratic republic if you can keep it." And I don't think people want it. I don't think that they want that anymore.
You're seeing a heavy shift in this. I'm glad you point that out, because what you're seeing right now is a heavy shift towards populism.
Yes.
Across party boundaries. It just so happens that legitimate populism that is by the people, of the people, for the people, is the polar opposite of right-wing populism, because right-wing populism is just another way of saying fascism.
Right, well, that's the problem. Is I don't think people understand that there is a difference between the two, and my fear is that look, will the world go through some weird shit if the United States falls? Yes, but they went through weird shit when Rome fell.
Yeah.
Will we continue to live and survive? Yes. Will it be awesome? No. Because even when Rome fell, what you had happen was things like roads, fell into disrepair, information, and knowledge.
Travel.
What's that?
Information and knowledge didn't travel.
Correct.
The way it was.
And you also lost a lot of what would be considered nowadays as the elite education, right?
Yeah, and one thing I do just want to point out with the comparison to Rome is, in this we're kind of talking about the Western Roman Empire, because by the time you had any of Rome fall, it had already gone through the schism between East Rome and West Rome, right?
Mm-hmm.
So West Rome obviously is the traditional, like from Rome, the city, with the power of the Vatican rising at that point behind it. Eastern Rome was the Eastern Orthodox, centered in Byzantium, and they had more of a sphere of influence, kind of like America has a sphere of influence.
Mm-hmm.
Eastern Rome had a sphere of influence over the Middle East and Asia, and Western Rome had the sphere of influence of Europe and North Africa.
That's a very good point to make.
When Western Rome fell, Eastern Rome survived, and they continued on for another 1,000 years.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's something that does get lost on most people who are only casually interested in history. But let's focus on this as if it's the Western fall. Okay.
Yeah, let's call the US in this metaphor Western Rome.
Right.
And Europe and China are Eastern
Rome. So what people don't seem to take into consideration, I think, is the fact that this system of a democratic republic has served at least the United States very, very well for 248 years. And
which is about the clock on any empire.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Years.
And the fact of the matter is that when you have Nero, I mean, like, I'm sorry, but you can make the comparison. I don't like making the comparison between Trump and Hitler, though there are so many opportunities to do so. I don't like that.
It's kind of hard when, that Venn diagram, there's about a millimeter on either side where it's not matching up.
Exactly. So it is difficult to not make that comparison. The reason I don't like to make that comparison is because I think it's an overused trope at this point, and I think that it is lost on people. I don't think people are actually, like, they hear that and they go, yeah, whatever. Okay. I think it's been overused. I mean, this is something, the comparison to Hitler, I remember.
Hitler got the same thing with Napoleon, though, let's point out. And they had a lot in common. Hitler got compared to Napoleon just as much as Trump is compared to Hitler.
No, and I agree with you on that. But here's the reason why I'm trying to reframe it in a different historical perspective. Okay. I remember the very first time I saw the comparison to Hitler, and it was George W. Bush. And I was in San Francisco at the time, and I was at Pier 39, which is very touristy. And I was amazed that you could walk into a store and you could buy magnets and buttons and pins and all this stuff that had George W. Bush with a Hitler mustache. And even though I had no love for George W. Bush at that time because I disagreed with his politics, his policy, and pretty much everything except the fact that he seemed like a guy I would actually want to have a beer with, I found it very, very disrespectful. And since then, the Hitler comparison comes up over and over and over again, no matter who the politician is, no matter who the party is, right? Now, granted, with
which,
all
to be fair, Sorry, I just want to
No,
point
go
out,
ahead.
to be fair, I think it is a more apt comparison to put Trump next to Mussolini or Franco from Spain.
You're
rather than
probably you're probably right. I would say
Because
Mussolini.
while there are elements of Nazi ideology that have permeated MAGA and specifically Trump, there are elements of that. But I think it is a more apt comparison because to me, the distinction between fascism and Nazism comes down to
the uniform.
Well, yeah, was it designed by Prada or
Hugo Boss?
Hugo Boss.
So, to me, the reason why that's a little more apt of a comparison is because while Trump is a virulent racist, it's kind of difficult to pin him down on the Nazi version of fascism, which is holding the race nation at the highest priority. Whereas with fascism, it's simply the nation. It's the Italians. It's the Spanish.
Right.
It's not the in Nazism, it's the Aryan white non-Jewish Germans. Right?
Well, I think
that's the distinction for me.
I think part of the reason why I want to go back to the fall of Rome is because the United States has been often referred to as the second uprising of Rome, A.
Mm-hmm.
B, I like the idea of comparing Trump to Nero. I think the difference is that while Nero fiddled as Rome burned, Trump will be golfing as the United States burns. So I think that there is, aside from the musical instrument, the idea of the distraction or the lack of care for what's happening around him.
Yeah.
Because, he's more...
What does it matter to me? I have my pretty golf club.
Yeah, he's so self-absorbed that I find it difficult to believe that there's any reason to think that he's anything other than a modern-day version of Nero. But with all that being said, this is supposed to go from what? You said Canada? Greenland
down to
Greenland,
Colombia.
Canada, U.S., Mexico, Caribbean.
And essentially what the idea is that we're going to take technology and use that technology to make decisions on everything? Question mark?
Question mark.
Is that...
I'm not really convinced that they're going to use technology to do this, but rather
No, it'll be
magnets.
It'll be a facade of technology, like with Palantir and with... I'm sure Elon is working on some kind of like cybersecurity or surveillance type deal.
Now, the important part of this is the backloaded asterisk, if you will, that was signed day one on January 20th, which said, in an executive order, within 90 days of the date of this proclamation, the Secretary of Defense, which is who?
Hegseth.
Exactly. And the Secretary of Homeland Security.
Gnome.
Yes,
Christy Dog Killer Gnome.
They shall submit a joint report to the President about the conditions of the southern border of the United States and any recommendations regarding additional actions that may be necessary to obtain complete operational control of the southern border, including whether to invoke the Insurrection Act of 1807, which brings about martial law. What happens under martial law, or more importantly, what does not happen under martial law?
Elections.
Correct.
I will take this opportunity to remind any listener that is in the United States, buy guns, buy ammo, train with them, be comfortable with them. Because with that, we're getting a little too close for comfort for me.
Okay,
now,
well, hold on.
Before you say anything, let me add in here, 90 days from January 20th is what?
Hitler's birthday.
April 20th.
Which, from what I understand, is one of Elon's favorite days, not only because he was raised a Nazi, but also because...
he was named for a Nazi character in a book.
Yes, he was. But also because he finds the meme of it being weed day when he smoked weed once and didn't inhale, like Bill Clinton.
Now I watched that.
Joe Rogan.
He inhaled. I watched it.
No, he did not. I've been around plenty of weed smokers, and that was not an inhale.
Well, I have to go double check that, but I thought he did at the time. Anyways, that part doesn't matter. Because weed's not the issue. If everyone fucking smoked weed, we wouldn't be at war. We wouldn't have problems. Everyone would be happy. We'd all be sitting back,
Yeah,
waiting.
we'd be saying to Mexico, hey.
Yeah, more tacos, please.
I'll send up some more cartel weed. That shit's fire.
All right. So I guess to me, again, I look at this as an opportunity to compare Trump in a way that goes historically back further than Hitler, Mussolini, Napoleon.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm hearing from you guys when it comes to this, it sounds to me like like you guys are talking, we're not too far off from that kind of like social credit system that they run in China.
Which I'm not even fully convinced is a real thing. I'm pretty sure that's just propaganda. But
I've actually heard from multiple, I mean, like when I say multiple, I don't know if it's true or not, but I don't know. Okay. I don't know
whether
if
it's real or it isn't. With AI and with Peter Thiel's Palantir and with all of these like tech bro Silicon Valley security things, we are headed towards an American social credit system, the likes of which China would blush at, not to mention the fact that nowhere else in the world has a credit system quite as nefarious as the US. So like we already have a normal credit system that is horrible.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to add on top of that AI driven social credit. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, like the whole
you
thing.
Want to talk about 1984?
You want to talk about an invasion, not only in 1984, but you want to talk about an invasion of your personal life.
Well, we sold that shit down the road long ago with the Patriot Act.
Anymore, I'm going to create
I would say
own AI system, and I'm going to call it Hal.
You're going to call your AI system Al?
Hal.
Hal? Oh,
Al,
from 2001, Space Odyssey? Okay, I got you. I thought you said Al. All right, so this for those of you who don't know, that is a Paul Simon reference. All right, so this again seems like a prompt, if you will, for a new party.
Yep. I would hope so.
And as we've discussed on 2 previous episodes of on this particular topic, what does that look like?
Just to bring in more 80s. I want a new drug.
Well, I just have one more thing I would like to add.
Hold on. Don't fucking Huey Lewis me. You know how much I fucking hate Huey Lewis. And if you don't know how much, let me tell you how much. I fucking I hated Huey Lewis when they came out. I still hate them. The best joke ever was Bobcat Goldthwait going, if you saw Huey Lewis walking down the street, would you go, oh my God, is that Huey Lewis? Like one of the #1 pop stars in the country? Or would you go, is that one of my dad's friends?
Well, I can rest assured to tell you, I totally said that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that nobody would recognize Huey Lewis.
Oh, I don't know about that.
No.
There's some hardcore and the news fans that would probably... Anyway.
So just one other thing I wanted to add before we hop into the new party, which is, I forget who said it. I'm almost certain it was a founding father. It might have even been Ben Franklin. But the quote goes, anyone who is willing to sell their privacy for the sake of security deserves neither.
Exactly. Okay, so basically we've covered Colton's 5 core principles and 10 non-negotiables already. We covered that on episode 2 of Time to Get a New Party Started.
And I'm sure you'll hit on quite a few more that I could have added, but I feel like 15 points is plenty.
Yeah,
on my end, at least to start us.
Yeah, no, I think it's good that we try to keep it simple, but there's a lot of things because you're talking all of government. So now,
really quick, before you get started, one of my ideas I've long thought about is separation of church and state, and this is one of my. I really want this done, which is I am not religious, but I believe in freedom of whatever you believe. Keep it to yourself.
freedom of individual practice and community practice, but you do not have the freedom to impose it on others.
It's the idea that politics are being preached from the pulpit.
Yeah.
And to discourage that, I would want that if your church, your reverend, whomever is preaching politics from the pulpit, you lose your church. The church is sold.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
The land is sold off. The money goes to a local charity.
I wouldn't do that. It's interesting. It's interesting that you bring that up because one of my pet peeves, and I don't know if I would make this part of the platform for the party, the new party, but if it were just my idea, it would be all taxes or all churches get taxed.
The problem with that though is then they can form under our current system, they could form their own, pack.
Yeah, but they're essentially doing that anyway. I mean, so
yeah, they're already doing
they're preaching from the pulpit, and the bottom line is, to me, if you want to preach from the pulpit, that's fine, but you got to pay the entry fee, and the entry fee is taxes. So to me, I would be like, every church is getting taxed. That in of itself would cover a lot of the financial issues that this country has. I think that millionaires and billionaires need to be taxed accordingly.
Yep. Looking at you, Copeland. I'm looking at you, Olstein.
Yeah.
On down the line.
Right?
Yeah, Copeland and Olstein. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Well, I just had to buy that jet from Tyler Perry.
You got beautiful eyes.
All right, so let's get into this now. This is the third.
Have you seen him say that?
Yes, I have.
What did he say?
You got beautiful eyes.
He's getting interviewed about buying the jet from Tyler Perry because he said that there were demons on public commercial jets, and he tries to divert by telling the reporter, "You have beautiful eyes."
Well,
yeah, it was so creepy.
Looking with his soulless demon eyes at her.
Yeah, absolutely. COVID-19. I'll throw you away.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into this now. These are my. You guys keep fucking derailing this train.
We're doing our best, okay?
I just zipped up my zipper. I just realized my zipper was undone.
Oh, well, that's important to a political conversation. Thanks for sharing.
I couldn't help it. She had beautiful eyes.
One could argue that America's entire government's zipper is down right now.
Yeah, we are. We're definitely. Well, let's put it this way: in Trump golf terms,
we're hanging hog.
No, we're playing dick out. You know what dick out is, right?
No.
You guys never played dick out golf?
No,
I've never played golf, and I have no desire to.
Okay, dick out golf is if you are when you go to tee off, if you don't make it past the women's tee, you got to play the rest of that hole with your dick out.
That's a little suspect.
And I'm going to tell you something. Being 11 years old and my first job was as a caddy. Yeah, it was a little disturbing. It was a lot
of gray pubes.
Well, all right. So my take.
We're going to play floss out. What?
My take on what we need in government, first and foremost, ranked choice voting to empower voter choice. Now, Colton, I believe that was one of your. We agree on that. Open primaries for fair candidate selection. I think we agree on that.
Yeah, for me, I spun it more in the sense of all candidates deserve equal airtime on all major media.
Yeah, but I think you can do that, though. You can do that if you have a circumstance where it is publicly funded, first and foremost, so everyone's on fair ground. And secondly, if you're going to commit to whether it's a 3-month run or a 6-month run, I don't think that they need to be running for more than 6 months. I really don't.
I would argue you get a quarter. Personally,
yeah,
that's what every other developed country does.
I think so too. I think 3 months is
you get a quarter, sometimes even less. I think Germany you get like 2 months of running.
I think you need 3 months. I think you need 3 months of hardcore, retail political involvement. I do think that you need 3 months, and that may be just a touch short of what you actually need in this country, but I don't think it needs to be more than 6 months. All right.
The whole infinite campaign, that's
ridiculous. When you have, Trump was running for fucking 4 years.
Yeah.
That's
Not
ridiculous.
to mention, he was basically campaigning his entire presidency, his first presidency.
Exactly. Like,
and
enough.
the whole lead up to the first presidency. So we really got like probably 7 years of him running
continuously. And I get it because it just fills the coffers of his campaign, but enough is enough. I think everyone's tired, even those who are, diehards. I mean, like, it's kind of like you go and you see a concert, and that concert comes back to town within the year, and it's the same concert. It's the same playlist.
I'll do you one better. How long can you be a deadhead and actually enjoy it?
Well, I think
I like the Grateful Dead. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but how long could you like
honestly
travel with the Dead?
Like if that was your only thing, was I'm just going to travel and follow the Dead. Yeah. All right. Term limits for Congress to reduce career politicians. We already agreed on that.
Mhm.
Balanced budget requirements to avoid chronic deficit. I think we can all agree on that. I think that the reason there's not a balanced budget is because you don't have bipartisanship working the way it's supposed to.
Well, it's that, and it's also the American brain rot of we have to give 60 cents of every dollar in taxes to the military.
Yeah.
Like that's part of it too. Like,
yeah, and
I
it's
agree
too
with
much.
you in the sense of if you're not running a balanced budget, then you're not running an effective budget. But to me, you can balance the budget simply by shifting. You don't even have to like worry about necessarily changing anything other than reducing military spending.
Well, I think that if you reduce military spending and so let's say just
And
for
we'll
the
still
sake
be number one.
just for keeping it simple, okay? Let's say
Mhm.
the entire, and this is not a correct number, but let's say the entire budget for a year for the United States was $1 trillion, okay?
Yeah.
You don't have to change that that's the budget. But what you can do is you can change how that budget is being applied. And in turn,
reallocate funds.
by reallocating those funds, you can actually create a situation where those dollars are returning more than they're taking. So the military budget's always going to take money, but they're not returning money.
That's not their job. The military.
It's not.
The Pentagon's job is to siphon taxpayer dollars into the military-industrial complex.
Okay, but if you take another agency like NASA, and you look at every dollar spent actually returned profit of $7, I believe it is, because of the innovations in the science and the technology and all that.
Yeah, because that actually does trickle down.
It does.
Eat your heart out, Reagan.
Yeah, that's the type of system that I'm talking about. Like, we need to look at what is actually bringing money back into the system. So as an example, even with education, every dollar spent gives us like $4 back or $5 back. I forget what the number was. But when you spend $1 and you know that whether it's through taxes or whether it's through productivity or whether it's through innovation, you're getting return on that investment. That's money well spent.
Yeah. One side note on that I just want to point out, because you did mention NASA, I find it very ridiculous when people say we need to cut NASA's budget. They're not doing anything. They're not, this and that. You're correct. They return more than we give them in the sense of they give us science and technology and innovation and advancement. But also, I believe it was Neil deGrasse Tyson that I heard this from. If you took a $1 bill and you divided it into proportionate amounts, like you cut it, let's say 50% of it went to the military, you cut it in half, right?
Mm-hmm.
NASA's budget from the federal government prior to any cuts from Trump, you wouldn't have even hit the green ink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On one of the short sides of the bill.
Right.
You wouldn't have even hit the green ink. And you're talking about let's cut it.
Right. And that's the thing that I think is ridiculous, is that these politicians, and it's both sides. Again, this isn't just Trump. This isn't just Republicans. This is Democrats as well. And I would go so far as to say many of the independents that are currently in government. Mm-hmm. When you don't look for the obvious return, how are you making your decisions? That doesn't make sense to me. the first thing you should be looking for, and granted, I know national defense, by the way this country was laid out, by the way the Constitution's laid out, national defense is definitively number one on the list. I'm not going to argue with that.
By a mile.
But what I will argue is, does that have to be number one every year? Could it be number one every third year or every other year? And in between, could we take and reallocate, I don't know, 15%, 20% of that budget towards NASA or education? Like,
I mean, I would even argue you can maintain its spot at number one. I don't necessarily, I mean, I have problems with it being our number one spending, but that's kind of besides the point. We as a country are a very warlike people. And if that's what people want their taxes going to, we can still have the majority of taxes going to that, or a plurality of taxes going to the military. But they do not need $800 billion a year, almost $1 trillion a year. And before you know it, probably $1 trillion a year.
Oh, yeah, easily.
When they haven't passed an audit in 7 years.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that, well, I'm getting to
and
that.
And soldiers are on fucking food stamps.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Jon Stewart.
Yeah, exactly. And I am getting that. I would put a ban on gerrymandering and redistricting. I would make that to where it is literally just a grid, and that's the way it should be. Full transparency.
You have grids of approximately 10,000, I think it's supposed to be.
Exactly. And just make that fucking grid, and however that falls, it falls. Full transparency for campaign finance and lobbying disclosures. Again, I get where you're coming from, Colton, when you say lobbyists should no longer be part of the equation.
They should just be outlawed.
Well, lobbyists will always be a part of it. And I think this goes back to Adams, who realized that factions exist, and we can either give them an environment in which they can exist, and we can kind of try to control them, or we can let mob rule. So my argument,
and I think Adams has been historically proven incorrect on this, because what you have right now is legalized bribery.
Well, the way that it's being, again, I'm not disagreeing that it needs to be adjusted. Okay, I'm not saying that there doesn't need to be restrictions put on it. What I am saying is that the idea of the factions will always exist, and it matters in this sense. You need to have some sort of way for those factions to express themselves. Does that necessarily have to be through lobbyists and lobbying? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not quite sure on that.
A faction is just a political party.
Well, no,
that's what a faction is.
Well,
a faction has nothing to do with spending money to influence an election.
No, I agree with you on that.
The vote of a member of Congress.
The way that Adams used the word faction, though, was historically different. So when he spoke of factions, he was speaking of pockets of people that were in alignment in their thinking and demanded the government listen. So that
again, that's a political party that has nothing to do with lobbying.
Well,
but
I agree to disagree on that one. So when we get into like economy and innovation, support small business and entrepreneurship through deregulation where appropriate. Tax simplification. I definitely think that we need to have taxes simplified. There should be no reason that I have to spend $600 to have my taxes done, because I have to hire somebody that can track every fucking loophole that's available to me, so that I'm not that I'm trying to take advantage. And it's not even trying to take advantage. It's like, okay, well, look, if this is a law and that particular law gives me a loophole where I'm not responsible for that, why am I going to give you more than I have to give you? But I have to hire this motherfucker.
Yeah, and it comes down to the government has been consistently lobbied. There's that fun word again. Has been consistently lobbied by tax filing companies to maintain the ridiculous and confusing nature of it.
I think
they stay in business.
I think what you're going to see,
they should just be government employees for the IRS, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and
You should be able to.
The government
I
should
agree
just
with you.
Either send me a bill or a check,
Right.
and that's it.
And I agree with you. There should be government, like just like you have H&R Block or any of those other tax services. There should be a government availability for people that don't want to go to H&R Block, don't want to go to any of these services, don't want to be out of pocket, but still want to make sure that they're doing shit correctly. And it's not even about taking advantage of loopholes or getting the like forget all that.
The idea that the government can say, we know how much you owe, but if you don't give us the right number, you go to jail or get fined.
Right, and that's bullshit. Okay, so we're in agreement on that. Infrastructure investment, including green energy, modern transportation, broadband. How, as the number one country in the world, the number one superpower, is it possible that we have areas in this country that don't have internet? That's ridiculous. That should be absolutely, in this day and age at least, that should be an absolute right. Specifically available to lower income for free. I don't think that there should be any charge for being able to just access the internet. That's bullshit. Fuck you. Enough.
And for transportation, because you mentioned that, I would like to add an addendum to my points on transportation. I was focusing mostly on EVs. We need to not only bring back Amtrak, but we need to bring it back so crazy in such a decisive way that we put Japan and China and Europe to shame.
Absolutely. There's no excuse to not be able to go from New York to LA in under 3 hours.
Yeah. I mean, because we have the technology for high-speed rail, which was, no pun intended, derailed by Elon because he's a fucking asshole. But on top of that, we had a good train system. And Reagan defunded Amtrak.
Right.
Like, for no reason.
Well, no, there was a reason, and that reason was automotive and air.
Lobbyists.
Again, I'm not saying that you're wrong about your theory on that. What I'm saying is, okay, when you don't give a release valve, at least in some form or fashion, for people to make their case to the representatives, being in the form of one person or 10 people coming up to you as a elected representative and explaining to you why they think that this is important. It's up to the politician to decide whether or not they move on it. Here's where the problem is. Those
buying votes.
No. The problem is those lobbyists have deep pockets and they're willing to write big fucking checks. That's what needs to stop. That's what needs to stop. You know what I mean? So, I think you still need to have lobbyists, but they can't be buying the vote. They can't be dictating based on how deep the coffers are on their side what the law is going to be. That's bullshit. All right, moving on. Encouraging worker retention and education for the modern economy, specifically in tech and green jobs. Retraining, yeah. Promote technological innovation, AI, biotech, renewable energy with ethical frameworks. There are no ethical frameworks with AI right now because our government is a geriatric-run government, and those who aren't in their 70s, 80s.
If I have TikTok on my phone and I have my earbuds in, can TikTok read my thoughts?
Exactly. You cannot govern over what you don't understand. So that would be a change. Now, when we get to healthcare, we were in agreement on universal healthcare. We were in agreement on addressing the costs and transparency. We were in agreement on fostering the private sector for innovations to improve outcomes. Now let's get into environment and energy. Strong action on climate change investments in renewable energies, carbon capture and conservation. All right.
We were in agreement on that.
We're in agreement on that. But what a lot of people don't seem to understand is that this can be done without really affecting business in a highly negative way. I would put an emphasis on market-driven solutions and private sector leadership in green innovations. Now, the idea that a party, no matter whether Republican, Democrat, or this new one that we're trying to create, would pick winners and losers, I hate to break it to you, that's always the case. Every government picks winners and losers. And if you don't believe me, well, if you have a contract with the government as a business, they picked you as the winner.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone else that put a bid in for that contract that didn't get it,
they're on their fucking own.
They're on their fucking own. Support for energy independence that includes transition strategies for fossil fuel workers. I honestly believe, let's put it this way. I find it difficult to believe that somebody that works in a coal mine wouldn't, under any circumstance, would not prefer to not have black lung. I find it difficult to believe that
would be nice.
Anyone that works as a coal miner wouldn't be open to the idea of, hey, look, here's a free education. Now you can work on solar. And, here's something. You're going to get paid more. All you got to do is learn this.
Or you can keep mining coal, be dead at 60.
Yeah. So your choice. Social issues and civil liberties. I think these are always big ones to me. Yeah. Protect individual rights and privacy, freedom of speech, religion, reproductive rights. My only caveat would be, I'm so fucking done with churches preaching from the pulpit. Time for them to fucking pay taxes.
Right. I do want to just add, I think this is a conversation we've had before. We have slightly different conceptions of what freedom of speech means. So in the sense of, I'm of the opinion that you are free to freedom of speech, what that means and what the letter of the Constitution means it as, is you will not be politically chastised or you will not be arrested by the government for saying something against the government. That's what freedom of speech means, letter of the law, right?
Yeah. Well, the idea is that
people have taken it so far that they now think that freedom of speech means I'm immune to all criticism for what I say from anyone and anything.
I disagree with that. I'm with you on that. Freedom of speech does not mean that you are free from criticism. Freedom of speech,
free from social consequences.
Right.
That's the
freedom of speech means you have the right to say that without going to jail. End of fucking story. Right. So that's my view is you should be able to say anything you want and not go to jail. And I would only put the small
except
caveat
for
of
stochastic terrorism or shouting fire in a theater,
right? Where you could create a problem where people could get physically injured. You know what I mean? Like that, I don't think is good. So like screaming fire in a theater, now you have a rush to the exits.
I'm of the opinion that the general consensus on the meaning of the letter of the law in the First Amendment which is you are not going to go to jail for having an opinion that is counter to the narrative of the government.
Yeah,
that's the freedom of speech that I support.
We're in full.
The freedom of speech that I do not support is I can go out there and be hateful towards marginalized groups and do all of this and then expect no social consequences.
Well, wait a minute. All right. So when you say social consequences, what are you referring to?
Like, obviously it's a little played out at this point, but like the whole cancel culture thing, like that's a social consequence to speech that people generally don't like.
Well,
that's not an attack on your freedom of speech.
That idea of being canceled, okay, is first off, being canceled is bullshit. No one's canceled. Okay.
Yeah, I agree. It's stupid, but I'm just using that as the easiest example of what I'm talking about.
Now, if you could remove the word cancel or the phrase cancel culture out of it completely, And you could just go back to like the 1980s. If somebody in 1960, 1970, 1980 said something that was overtly, horrendously shitty, and people no longer wanted to watch that person, or, let's say it's an actor, right? So let's say John Wayne comes out and he goes, listen here, Pilgrim, I want to fuck all these little black bitches right in the asshole. Well, guess what? That's offensive. Okay. And if you don't get
probably
picked
not
up,
getting hired. He's probably not getting hired anytime soon by any of the production companies
because he's he's a public figure.
Yeah,
and
that is a social consequence.
But the money that would be invested into him being in a project would not be recouped because of the general population no longer being favorable to him. Okay?
Which is
that's just
exactly
life.
My point.
That's just fucking life. Okay.
Okay, then we are in agreement. We are in agreement on that.
Yeah,
that is exactly my point.
The idea that, but by the same token, we've had disagreements when it came to like Chappelle talking about trans. Now, you didn't find that funny. All right. My argument was stand-up comics. They are. It's necessary. It's a necessary thing in our culture. And I would say that goes throughout
not necessary
history.
To punch down. Carlin never punched down.
But you have to be thinking. You have to observe that as a punch down. And I would argue that I didn't see that as a punch down. Right now, we won't get into the discussion on it. But my point being, the comedian definitively, out of anyone in, and this isn't just because I was a comic for 30 years. This is because I believe that the fool, the jester, the comedian, the stand-up has had a place in history that has been carved out with a lot of blood, a lot of sweat, and a lot of tears to cement themselves as a necessary part of our society. And sometimes you have to hear things that you disagree with, or you don't like, or don't think are funny, or you think is punching down, in an effort to elevate the conversation to the next level. And say what you will, but all of the blowback that Chappelle got on that elevated the trans conversation across the United States, because people were having conversations about those bits. So whether you liked the bit, thought the bit was funny, thought the bit was tasteless, thought it was punching down, whatever the fuck you thought, what it did was immensely valuable. It created a conversation.
My point being, hiding behind, oh, it was just a joke, bro, is the most pathetic way of getting away with being racist, sexist, misogynist, on down the line.
Okay. And I would agree with you.
That's my point.
I would agree with you if it was the parts guy at the water cooler with you at a job. But when it's somebody who has invested their entire life and made a career and have spent countless hours refining their craft and their art, no, I don't agree that it's just a joke, bro. I don't agree with that at all. Moving on. Criminal justice reform, focusing on ending mass incarcerations for nonviolent offenses and promoting rehabilitation. I think that we have gotten to a point where
the U.S. is 2% of the population and 25% of the prison population of the world.
And recidivism is high.
Because we have no programs for people to improve themselves inside or
outside. Exactly. So who's going to hire the felon? It's on every job application. Are you a convicted felon?
Ban the box. Ban the box.
Ban that fucking box. All right. Immigration. Comprehensive immigration reform, secure borders with pathways to legal status for undocumented individuals who contribute to society. Let me refine that a little bit and say this. We are a country of immigrants, and the sooner that the people who live in this country legally understand that at some point in their history, there was somebody that was not from here that came here, and that's why you're here. Okay. this idea of Trump getting rid of birthright citizenship, go fuck yourself. That is ridiculous. I hope that the Supreme Court, when that comes up, realizes that they need to stick with existing law and tell him that that's a step too far.
Well, that just reminds me of really early on in these fascist ICE raids, some ICE agents went onto a First Nations reserve and were like, "How long have you been here?"
Yeah.
Like, go fuck yourself.
Go fuck
dude.
yourself.
My family, half of my family lived and died before you were even a thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
so, and mainly what I'd like to see is I'd like to see them put more bodies towards streamlining the legal immigration system, specifically looking at how to meet our economic needs. Now, does that mean, do we want the brightest and the best? Absolutely. Do we want the educated? You bet. If you come here from another country on a visa, education visa, we should be able to like say, hey, we'd like to keep you here because you're smart. And we should also be able to go, you know what? You didn't get the grades we thought. You can go back home. But we should definitely have...
Here's your report card. It's got a flight.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Why are we not looking at...
one-way ticket back to India for you.
Why are we not looking at the students that come in from other countries and based on what their education level is, based on their grades, and based on what they're studying, why shouldn't we be looking at them and going, I'll tell you what, we're going to fast track you as a citizen. And
yeah.
If you stay here 10 years, whatever's left on your student loans, we're going to wipe out.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the case on a lot of education. Look, I get it. The person who studies underwater basket weaving, not a big contributor to the fucking society.
But the arts are just as important.
I'm not saying
STEM.
You will not get me saying that the arts are not as important.
I get it. Underwater basket weaving specifically is just
that's what I'm saying is specifically.
Bag, but
yeah, that's always the punching bag. That does not mean that the classical artist, the exquisite potter, painter,
the art major,
that classical art, the person who does, name the artistic endeavor, right? Whether that's acting, singing, playing a musical instrument. If you excel at that, there should be a timeline in which if you do use that talent for this period of time, we're going to help, if not wipe out your student debt, we're definitely going to help reduce it as much as possible. I
mean, my only point of disagreement on that is I think that any education is valuable in some degree.
I agree.
And
look,
for that, it should be free at the point of service. That's my only...
remember we were talking on the second part of this that there are transition periods.
Right.
This is one of those. Ideally, if I could snap my fingers and make my ideal education system, everyone would be able to, at any point in time, become a student at any school, whether that was a university, whether that was a trade school, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
If you're learning a new talent, if you're learning a skill, if you're learning something new, if you're learning an art, it would be covered. It would be free. And the reason
is
we
are investing in your success because your success means
our success. Exactly. All right. National defense, strong but restrained military focused on defense and diplomacy, avoiding endless wars. Support for veterans, healthcare, mental health, and reintegration programs. Education.
There's one thing that I've thought of, and I just want to spitball it at you real quick, both of you. I've had the thought once or twice in an effort to reduce military spending and kind of rein in our military presence outside of the U.S. What if every country that has a U.S. military base has a democratic election, regardless of whatever regime is in place, whatever administration or regime is in place, that is solely yay or nay, are we welcome here? If we are welcome, we'll stay. If we are not, we will leave.
I don't think that works. unfortunately. I get your intent with that. I think it's a very, very,
again, just spitballing here.
I think it's a good intention, but that won't work in practical application.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because sometimes we're there to make sure that they're not fucking around.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And there's an aspect of that could be considered
but do we have
tampering?
the right okay, that's fair, but do we have the right to be the world police? Because
I
would argue we
we're
do
part
not.
of NATO.
Well,
I would argue we do not.
I would argue that I don't like being the world police, and I wish it wasn't up to us. But if it's not up to us, then who steps up? Because somebody will be the world police. So it becomes.
Would you rather Russia or China?
Yeah, exactly. China. So there's that balance of not wanting, and I think that that's actually a good place to be in. All right.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that our elected officials, and I don't just mean president or party, I mean like as a whole, all of our political representatives would be of the opinion that we don't want that job, but we understand that we have to do that job. Just like I would hope that most of our political, specifically presidential candidates would be like, look, this isn't a job I want, but I think I can bring something to it to make things better.
Well, it's the whole Plato, the best ruler is the one who wants least to be a leader.
Right, and that's absolutely true. I think that is a historical truth, a philosophical truth. I think that is a core truth. The person who really doesn't want the job is the best person suited for it when it comes to leadership, specifically of a country, because that's a lot to take.
Yeah.
And if you're saying, I want that job because I think I'm going to be kick ass at it, or because
and anyone who wants power badly enough does not deserve it.
Exactly.
That's the alternative.
Exactly. All right. So education, we kind of already hit this. Affordable higher education options, I would argue, should be free. I don't think we'll get there soon enough. But at some point, it is only in the best interest of the country to have a population that is as educated as they want to be. And I'm very confident that the obstacle of cost prevents us from being the smartest nation on the fucking planet. It's the obstacle to get that. And now, with that being said, with online education, you should be able to sign up for any online course.
Yeah, I mean, shit, my whole master's program is online aside from my internship.
And you should get that for free.
Yeah.
And the reason you should get that for free is because it's all online. And every one of those fucking lectures could be recorded once and updated every couple of years.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to be charging people up the ass for that shit.
Yeah, I mean, last I checked, we have not had the sauce in Congress to add an amendment to the Constitution in decades. That's not changing anytime soon. My constitutional law class could have just been online, recorded 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And it would have been the exact same information.
Exactly. Same with history classes. Okay. And this isn't to say I want to get rid of history teachers or history professors, but what I do want to see is if you're going to place if you're going to bring down the cost of education, that's definitively a way to do it. And if it's going to be an entirely online class, while I think it should be for free and everyone should be able to, let's say you're going to become a history major and everything you can do on that history major education can be done online, and it can all be pre-recorded, and it can all be this, and it can all be that. Really, at the end of the day, even when it comes to testing, you could have AI checking all the test results. You could you could have literally probably 20 classes going online for free. It wouldn't cost the education, but even if you charge $300, $400, right?
Yeah,
that's a lot better than
a month.
That's a lot better to like $300 to take a class. I'm game for that. I'm willing to pay that. You know what I mean? Like you can work at McDonald's and you can get your history. You can get a master's degree as a history professor.
Yeah.
For $300 a class per semester. Yeah, like you could pay that. You could work your way through that. All right. Organizational values, fact-based policymaking relying on data and expert analysis, civil engagement, encouraging more participation in democracy. Examples would be like voting rights, education, cultural respect, foster civil discourse, and reject extremism on all sides. Youth and future-oriented, focus on the long-term solutions, not just the election cycle. That's the biggest fucking problem. Everyone's focused on the election cycle. Everyone's focused on the next election. Everyone's focused on, they're not just focused on 2020.
There's hardly any political engagement or involvement between cycles.
Right. We
It's
focus on
just-
2026. We focus on 2028. We focus on 2030. But what happens in between? What the fuck is going on in between? You know what I mean? Like, let's focus on the in between a little bit. And that's really what it boils down to me. You know what I mean? I actually got through all of that a lot quicker than I thought I would. But that's what it boils down to me is that these are common sense ideas. And even when you're talking about spending that maybe people feel uncomfortable with, like making education for free, I get that there will be people that go, "Oh, I had to pay for my education." Okay, well, it's a different day.
Yeah,
it's a different time.
I fucking hate that argument because it's like, okay, yeah. And didn't you think it sucked too when you had to pay it? And not only did you think it sucked that you had to pay for it, wouldn't you want it to be better for your children? Wouldn't you want it to be better for your nieces and nephews or anyone younger than you?
That argument is the same as saying, well, I had to ride horses in the winter to get where I wanted to go. And now this automobile comes around and it's enclosed and it has heat. That's not good.
I had to walk uphill both ways 500 miles and 500 more just to get to school.
Yeah.
And you're riding your fancy pants bus. Like, shut the fuck up, dude.
Exactly. And this is my point is that progress does not have to be restrained by the bullshit previous generations went through to get to the same place. Okay? Back in the day, you had to learn how to type on a typewriter. Well, guess what? It's a lot easier to learn how to type on a keyboard, a modern keyboard. Should you be mad?
Yeah.
And should you be like going, if you're not using a typewriter, you're cheating.
Yeah, like your mad things are getting better.
Exactly.
Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Exactly. So that's kind of where I'm putting it. And what I'd like to do at this point, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it before the next one the next pod that we do or when, but what I'd like to do is try to take all of this that we've compiled and put together a political pitch speech. And this is something that as I write it, I'm going to run it by both of you. And then at some point,
which speaking of which, Kiefer, you've been pretty quiet over the course of these points. Do you have any thoughts on any of them?
No, I've pretty much agreed. I've tried not to talk honestly because I feel like I'm going to cough.
Okay.
Okay. So it's the fear of a coughing fit.
See?
Yeah. It's the fear of a coughing fit.
All right. I'll leave you alone on it.
Then when your nephew's like, all right, I'll stop picking on you. So that's what I'd like to do is I'd like to create a political pitch speech. And the reason I want to do this is not because I want to run for office, although if there was enough support for me, I would contemplate it. But mainly because I think what we're talking about is common sense and something that everyone can agree on. I think that even if you disagree on certain small details, like some people,
like we can nitpick on certain things.
Exactly.
Even just between the three of us, between the two of us, we can nitpick on.
But if we approach this from a point of view of going, look, nationally for the United States,
yeah, let's all approach this in good faith and find good faith solutions,
and let's work together. Let's lock arms with our Republican brothers and sisters.
I'm sick of the division.
And that's my point. This division is fucking ridiculous.
I'm sick of the division.
We are all supposed to be Americans first.
Yeah, but at the same time, I can never, ever support any Republican that has supported Trump.
I get that. I get that. But you have to be able to go when that person and it doesn't have to be a Republican. There's Democrats that voted for Trump. Okay. So when you have that
I'm looking
person,
at you, Schumer.
yeah. When you have people who made a decision.
I don't support Schumer, but I do support Romney. There you go.
There you go. But when you have people who have made a decision, all right, and I'll give you an example. The namesake of this show, Elsie's Little Pickles. Elsie, our mom, your grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Our father voted for Nixon.
Who art in heaven.
Our father, who is your grandfather, voted for Nixon, as did our uncle, Joe. Those two motherfuckers never heard the end of it. They never heard the end of it.
Yeah.
I remember Clinton being elected and our mom turning to our dad and giving him shit for ever voting for Nixon. Okay? I don't think that that's appropriate. Okay? Like there's got to be a limit on the time that people get punished for making a mistake.
I miss the old days. The days when the political scandal was Clinton getting a blowjob in the Oval or oral office.
Yeah, those were good days.
If that was just our only problem.
Just like I said before, I'm strongly in favor of the Oval Office dome. Honestly, it's just funny.
I think you need to have a guy, anyone who's got to deal with the pressures of a presidency, they should have, like back in the day, speaking of Rome, they would have the temple whores that, like, all right.
The king's
in the
harlot.
old days, Victorian days, a nanny or an au pair, it was not uncommon that an au pair would calm the children down by giving them handies and the father.
I think it's the
children
father.
one I can't really get behind. But...
Yeah, I can't get behind the kids part of that, but I can get behind the dad part of that.
But it happened.
Well, it happened, but there's also
I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
Look, there's a tribe in fucking there's a tribe in fucking Africa, and this is no bullshit. That
it's no bullshit.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's astounding, but it's no bullshit. There's a tribe in Africa.
I have no idea what we're talking about, do you, Colton?
Not a fucking clue.
Fill him in.
George Carlin. Some of those old HBO stand-up specials had little cartoons where they informed you of things that were, it's amazing.
It's astounding, but it's no bullshit. All right.
Well, the only Carlin record that I have does have a lot of little cutaways from the actual show where it sounds very infomercially.
Mm-hmm. All right. So to kind of wrap this up and to get into the no bullshit, this is disturbing. Yeah, this is disturbing. This is disgusting by our terms, but this is something that has been in practice with this particular tribe, I believe in Africa, forever. Every woman in the tribe takes care of any of the babies, right? Like they all help each other out. It's very, very,
Yeah, the whole it takes a village.
Yeah, it's the whole it takes a village Hillary Clinton thing. However, when that baby boy is crying, guess what they do? They blow that little baby boy to calm it down. Yeah, it's disgusting. I'm not condoning it. I'm not promoting. I'm not anything. I'm simply reporting a fact. Okay?
It's no bullshit.
It's amazing.
Go to Africa and start crying.
Dude, if I got off the plane in Africa, I'd be in tears immediately.
Okay. Oh, speaking of that, one of the things I was going to bring up in news, which we didn't do on purpose, but there are now travel warnings going to the U.S. from Canada and the UK. They are now warning people.
Yeah, they're warning people.
Boy.
Yeah, I think that's something we have to save for another episode, though, because
we deserve our own little warning label.
Yeah, and
as of right now,
we're definitely long in the tooth on this episode.
Once you enter U.S. waters, airways, you will be transported back to 1837.
And with that, it's another Elsie's Little Pickles.